Welcome to a brand new episode of our series, Rethink, Reconfigure, Reinvent, where we discuss with industry leaders what they're thinking about the future, how they're becoming fit for the future. Today, I have the honor and privilege of talking to Kallol. Kallol is the CFO of the Oberoi Group, and as you know, the sector Kallol is representing has gone through quite a beating in the last 2 years. But at the same time, the sector has bounced back. The sector had to, look at things around customer centricity. It had to look at shortages of skilled labor. It had to look at many other problems which they have really worked around. So welcome to the show, Kallol.
Thank you so much for your very honorable introduction, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
So Kallol, thanks for joining us today. I think one of the questions which obviously comes, and you might give us the Oberoi perspective or the sector perspective, absolutely up to you. The last 2 years have been difficult, but how is the sector looking at the future, and how are you looking at coming out of the last 2 years? Any thoughts on that?
Luxury hospitality has always faced vagaries of various kinds of risks, and personally being in this sector for over 2 decades, I have seen 9/11, I have seen 26/11, I've seen the recession. So COVID is yet another, albeit one with a little deeper impact. What I would say is that every time this has happened, what we've seen is that history has shown that the sector has bounced back. And in this case, all the more so because unlike some of the other incidents that I mentioned or events that I mentioned, this one is a more prolonged one where people were stuck in their homes and were unable to really experience life, and therefore I think what people are doing is really coming out, and fingers crossed, but we are very hopeful that the industry will really take off in the next couple of years. But of course, being a risk-oriented person, I really don't want to talk too much about being positive. I think I would say I'm cautiously optimistic.
Kallol, when you look at it, how can technology and digital adoption really act as a catalyst for the luxury and the hospitality sector?
So here I would talk about a couple of experiences, with a bit of technology background. I always felt that there is a lot of scope, in terms of the whole financial management of the affairs of a company can be done much better through use of technology. But that's not all, because in the business of luxury hospitality, it's important that the technology that we're talking about, the digitization that we're talking about, really is not on the face of the customer, but it really produces things which enhances or enriches the experience of customers.
Okay.
Just before COVID hit, we implemented a center of excellence, which was pretty successful, and as luck would have it, I think we sort of completed almost the project in about March 2020, and thereafter the lockdowns started. So I think to answer your question on how digitization is going to go forward, we saw the first benefits of this right in the middle of the lockdown. We had literally 48 hours in which to transform to a scenario where we were working from home. People were working from home. So to enable payments to be made on time, banking channels to remain open, customers, etc., all of that required. But more important than that, we still had customers in our hotels. And this is not just true for our group, this is true for, I'm sure, for others in the same industry as well. And the technology that we used in the last couple of years to be deployed, this really helped the industry to minimize interfaces which were not allowed by the government, for example, touch-less kind of environment. Plus, it also helped in us reaching out to customers and being able to serve them in the true spirit of luxury hospitality. Without technology, I don't think that would have been possible. But I think it is the tip of the iceberg. This has just shown us the way. And like Newton said, we are still picking pebbles on the shore. Depending on what all really areas you wish to touch upon, I think there is immense scope from both a hospitality perspective as well as from a financial perspective.
Sure.
What has really been important in the last couple of years for this industry is, like most people-intensive industries and an industry which is intimately in touch with our guests, our customers, the initial shock was really difficult to handle. But most of the players you would see really worked it out well and showed a lot of resilience. And really speaking, I think we all came to the fore. In fact, players contributed amongst themselves and made representations to government, etc., and all of that. So all in all, I think it was a very mixed kind of experience. But I must say that we have come out stronger. And the other more important thing is, with the use of technology, with the use of other means, I think the industry has radically cut down its fixed cost. So that is something that is going to remain as such, and that's going to help the organizations, I'm sure, in a big way.
So Kallol, that was a lovely experience for us also, just before we went into the pandemic lockdown.
So let me take the interviewer seat for a bit. What is your experience, or what do you feel from your experience should be this digital innovation, or whatever else do you see from the tech side which would be required for the industry to really flourish in the future? I mean, as a customer, how would you look at it?
Right. No, and absolutely. I think I have been looking at the sector, and of course my own experience over the last 2 years. I think, like any other consumer or people-centric business, I think the hospitality sector would probably have to deal with this duality which you were talking of. That on one side I want to be touchless, contactless. On the other side I want to be intimate with my customers. I want to have that customer centricity as the mantra on which I would do everything. How do you marry these two? And the only way of trying to get these two done is through use of technology, right? And it could be, and it sort of extends beyond just the customer experience. It extends up to guest safety, for example. How do you look at efficiency, as you were saying? How do you look at technology playing a role in the customer experience, whether it's through IoT, whether it's through better, leveraging of artificial intelligence? How can the big data play a role in, the huge amount of data you're gathering about, from your customers? But again, if you look at it and you look at the contactless service delivery as a concept, or you talked about, seamless payment mechanisms, smart hotel rooms. Again, many of these technologies like IoT can play a role, but as you said, that it's not about being in the face, it's about being the brains behind, right? And if you look at even newer technologies like, we have obviously had chatbots for some time, but if you think of the metaverse now, which we all are, so excited about, it is possible to do your branding within the metaverse. It is possible to have customer complaints being handled in the metaverse, right? So marketing customer centricity, giving a customer the feel of, a virtual walkthrough in the metaverse. These are all possibilities which the technology is bringing to fore. And obviously it is not, a one-way street. There are risks. We are also advising clients around the risks around data privacy, what you're doing there. When you have guests in your hotels, there's always that balance of how intrusive you are with technology, because technology can be fairly intrusive, and versus how much is the comfort which you're giving to the customer. So, some players in the industry sometimes just go, completely on the other extreme, and that can also be a put-off, for your customers. But I think to sum it up, I think, if you look at every phase of your customer journey, right from, the reservation to the travel, to the stay, to the overall experience, and especially for a luxury brand like yours, where customers want it to be something unique, something out of ordinary. How do you do that? Because in some ways, technology can also make it very, very much up for grabs. So how do you keep that level of customization and yet make it available digitally? I think those are questions which
Sure.
organizations would have to grapple with.
Yes, I mean, very interesting perspectives, and I think you're quite spot on in terms of a lot of the areas that you're mentioning, and that is exactly where I think the industry is going. I agree with most of what you said.
So Kallol, just to change gears, ESG has become a focus for organizations, and I know that ESG has been at the forefront of many of your strategies in the organization, and of course you do see that the ESG agenda has become like a board mandate or a board discussion in every organization. How do you think your sector is responding to ESG, and what do you think are the key issues which your sector is dealing with?
Well, to begin with, I think hospitality, especially luxury hospitality, is really a major consumer of energy. And India, unfortunately, still continues to be a major consumer of coal, which is not really a great resource. Although 2060 does have or does hold out a lot of promise, and I think every player in the industry is really working a lot in this area. So I think the areas that really immediately come to attention is, one is of course use of electricity. So we've seen over the years, initially they were just simple solar panels. Now we see there's a lot of electricity being ported in different states. I think subject to the regulations of every state, a lot of companies are taking a lot of initiatives, and some are even having complete solar plants within their hotel. So that's one. But it's not just about these individual initiatives. There are hotels which would today boast about having an air quality, for instance, in Delhi, which is better than, let's say, New York, London, or any other city. But again, that is not the point. The point is about the overall carbon footprint that we are talking about. I think the consciousness has started really coming up. And the reason for that is people are appreciating that even for a businessman, it's important that even in order to raise funds tomorrow, you won't be able to raise funds unless you're clean in terms of your energy resources. So without any question, I think ESG is the big buzzword which is here to stay. There are a lot of touch points. There are organizations which are purely working only on this. I think the regulations, as and when they open up more, it will really help the industry a lot. Reduce water consumption. Water is again another major resource. So plethora of this, and the most important piece which I would say, which strikes me, is the measurability of this. So most companies or most organizations do a lot of stuff, but they are unable to measure the overall imprint. And there are today agencies available, and most companies really outside or in the West are doing such initiatives. So I think those are the areas where we need to get into as an organization, as a sector, and really play a leading role, because as I said that we are one of the largest consumers of energy. So yes, it is extremely important that we are cognizant to it. Our customers, I know, are extremely cognizant of this, and people do prefer to stay in hotels which are more environment friendly. So therefore, it's not only for the business, it not only reduces your own cost, it does not only contribute to the environment, but it also contributes to your bottom line. So I think as a CFO, that really is a selling point. So I have heard of conversations in marketing teams saying that, well, if we are doing energy, kind of conservation, then that should be marketed. So it all adds to the bottom line.
And do you think that customers are ready to pay a premium for, staying in a green hotel?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, at least the industry that I have worked at or represented in the last 2 decades, I think our customers don't mind paying the premium in order to be, because everybody is today health conscious. We don't know the long-term effects of the kind of corrosive environmental impact that can happen. So we do believe that this does play a very important role.
So Kallol, you mentioned about these thrice you've gone through this, right? 9/11, 26/11, and of course 2020 to 2022 now. Any learnings around how organizations should have reacted to financial resilience, risk management, getting over leveraged, managing working capital? Any thoughts from that?
So very interesting and relevant question. I think in today's day and age, risk management is another area where one really has to be very practical, very pragmatic, and make sure that the foundations of the organization are intact. And the reason why it's more relevant is because of this boom in the startup space, where a lot of risks are being taken, a lot of startups are perishing. Maybe 1 out of 100 startups are really flourishing. And in this day and age, it's important to have these learnings really brought to the fore. I think the ones that I would really emphasize on is, the first thing is, of course, to make sure that your capital structure of your company is attuned to the risk appetite that the organization has, which means that if you're depending on equity, then your stakeholders must know that it is a high risk business, and therefore their expectation should be, either the profits are high or they can lose capital, right? But if you are approaching, let's say, fund venture capitalists who are, let's say, from the pension regulatory space and all of that, who look for a very stable return, then you must make sure that your risks are also accordingly managed. And most importantly, I think, in this zeal to excel and in the zeal to grow, many organizations end up getting over leveraged. And that has really, not just now, but over, I think, decades, this has really turned out to be a really bad thing for a lot of companies, and many companies have perished. But that is our learning that we have here, that you should maintain your leverage, which is really linked to your risk appetite, and that you should be doing as a CFO on a continuous basis. And your stakeholders should be along with you on the same path. So that is one. And second is, of course, I would relate this to the point on your ESG, on the governance part of that, is at the end of the day, when such things come in, like a tsunami, it is the governance mechanisms that really hold you in high, esteem, and it really takes you through. So therefore, you need to establish the robustness of your governance mechanisms. I think these are a couple of learnings which we have learned, and I think the industry as such has learned. If your foundations are good, then obviously you will bounce back. And if you're open to innovation, I can see here it's written thinking out of the box. So that's exactly what we need. And we will all go ahead, but I think you should keep your ears and eyes open while you do it.
Kallol, one of the things I always wanted to ask is that, given the uncertain and the dynamic nature of business environment that we are currently living in, and ignoring the geopolitics for now, what truly makes the finance function, future ready? Because you've obviously seen this as a CFO, and what are the roles or the focus areas the CFO should, really prioritize to deliver this?
This is a very interesting question, and a very favorite question of mine, I would say, because I think it builds up it's basically creates the building blocks of the whole function. I think the finance function has come of age. When we started out 25 years back as professionals, it was more of accounting. Treasury used to be an important thing, raising money. Then corporate governance came in. I think now it's integrated completely with the business. So the CFO cannot afford to just look at these aspects only. I think the biggest role that has really, the biggest point that has really come out in all this is, as we all know, this is not something new that I'm saying, is data is the new oil. So data management. Now, when I talk about data, data is a fact. Data is not the truth, right? So who helps interpret the data and convert the fact into truths or several truths and allow the business to really select from that as to whichever is the best one. Now, this cannot be under the domain of anybody else. It has to be in the domain of finance, because finance is privy to every single transaction, every single touch point. So therefore, the finance functions have to articulate this and prepare this in such a way that information is available, not just raw data, for people to take decisions on. So I think that is the first and foremost thing. Second is, so on one hand I mentioned about data where you really make decision making important and interesting for stakeholders. And on the other hand, you create processes which enhances the agility of the organization in terms of being able to deliver. And not only here, I wouldn't stop here. I mean, when I talk of blockchain, this is again something which I'm very passionate about. Even, there's a lot of focus that could be brought about in areas like customer experience. I mean, for instance, let's say if you are a customer and if you are a guest, you are visiting any of our hotels or restaurants, you could be concerned about the food that you're having and that is being imported, right? So there are ways and means in which today one can give you the complete detail of, if you wish to know, the source of this product that you're having or consuming. I think the whole concept of luxury hospitality is about time, about space, and about experience. Right. It's not so much about the product. In any case, we are all conscious about what we are eating and all of that. So it's more about the experience. So how do we make the experience of a guest more subtle, like you rightly said, not intrusive, give that adequate amount of space to the guest, yet fulfill all the needs that the guest has to remain connected across the globe.
Right.
So on one hand this, and on the other hand, I think there are various other technologies which are again very interesting ones, which I feel personally the industry is going to take with open arms. Concepts of NFTs, for instance, and so we have already seen some rollouts happening in terms of virtual tours and all that. So probably a day will come when a customer gets to see the journey on the plate, right, of what is really happening. You talked about metaverse. Of course, I mean, in today's day and age with the hybrid model of working, metaverse is here to stay. I mean, if people can get married on metaverses, then surely people can have conferences and really collaborate on metaverses. So I think it's such a long journey ahead of us, so interesting. And I'm sure there will be many consultants who really already we have experienced some of them, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of help in terms of what is happening across the globe.
So Kallol, very interesting. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is that, as you're looking into the future, what kind of innovations you think would really make a difference in the way we experience luxury hospitality? You talked about metaverse, you talked about some others. Maybe some more thoughts on that.
When we talked about blockchain, I think one of the things is about traceability, you said, but I think it goes way beyond that, and even in the very basic levels. Today you see, let's after all this aura of experience, if we go back to the basics of accounting, tell me how many companies today spend, or how many departments in finance spend time and waste resources on reconciliations, bills still going around, right, and so on and so forth. So a blockchain will not only enhance traceability, it will remove this whole reconciliation problem. I think there are many such areas where we can talk about. There are many such experiences. I think a guest will have the privilege of choosing where he would or she would stay, what are the facilities that could be experienced. So metaverse would be used for those, in my view, not for the purpose of doing what we are already doing, right? Like you said that, today people are doing a lot of things virtually. It's also true that people are staying in hotels and working from hotels full time.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
So therefore, I would probably ask you as a customer why do you need to go to your office? Please come and stay in the hotel, experience it, and do your full work, whatever you need to do. So I think these are the very fresh angles, and that's the reason I feel hospitality is going to come back in a big way, because this sector, or this is something which is very vibrant, which depends on people, which depends on people not only to serve, but also people whom we are serving. Right. Like we say that, you know, we are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. So this human touch will continue to remain, and the backbone of all of this is going to be what we have all talked about.
Lovely, lovely. So thank you for those sharp insights, if I might call it, Kallol. As the hospitality sector rethinks, reconfigures and reinvents itself in the post-pandemic world, I think trust and sustained outcomes around the customer experience, around the operational efficiency would probably be key differentiators. Consumers have already started to venture out, as you mentioned, and I'm sure there's a lot to look forward to as a customer, as a consumer in this sector as we go back to your hotels. And the sector as a whole, I'm sure, would, you know, bounce back even more in the coming year. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in. We will be back soon with another episode of our series. Until then, stay safe and stay healthy.